Okay, morning everyone. Hiya. I just wanted to remind you of the text wall number, so if you need to take this down, grab a pencil. It's 07537402400. That's 07537402400. And remember, you have to type HOPE at the beginning of the message, and I'll be fielding your questions. So this morning, we've got, this afternoon, sorry, we've got a really interesting double act because I'm delighted to introduce to you Professor Ian Gibson, who's a professorial fellow, I think, at Liverpool Hope, and ex of Macquarie University in Australia. And he's going to be talking to one of his American friends who works in education over Skype. Now, Professor Gibson's got considerable expertise in the field of technology, so we've managed to rig together a system here using a laptop and Skype and so forth. But Ian's also got expertise in curriculum development and a whole breadth of experience in the field of education. So I'm not going to waffle on anymore. Text in your questions as the show proceeds, and we'll try and leave 10 minutes at the end for dealing with questions. Okay, over to Ian.
Well, what you might find difficult to believe is that I'm not actually here. This is a hologram. It's being projected into the room from a room across the side. This is going to be a hard group, I can tell. I'd better introduce Steve, and then we'll go through the process of showing you what we're about today. So, and you have to excuse my back. I hate the thought of having to look at his face.
Thanks.
But that's all right. But this is Dr. Steve Wyckoff. He's a director. His title is brilliant. It's the Director of Really Great Ideas. He works for the Educational Services and Staff Development Association of Central Kansas. And there are two things that you need to know about before we go into this. And the first is that Steve and I have been practicing our Liverpudlian accents, and I think we've got it perfect. Right, Steve?
I think we've got it down pat.
Okay, we've got it down pat. The second thing is this, and this is where we start to get into the whole logic of what we're doing today. I want you to make sure that you've got a pencil and a piece of paper handy, because you're going to be writing down things and keeping track of things and sharing things. Okay, stop. Let me start again. I want you to take out an interactive device that allows you to record and share information that you want to pass around the room. This is a really good group, Steve. They're really onto it.
You'd think it was 6:30 in the morning there.
Well, that's his excuse, and you guys don't have any. So either you go with the pencil and paper option, or you go with the other option. Hand up if you've got another option handy to you. You've got some device, right, that you're able to communicate with others with, and it doesn't look like this, right? Okay, this is a really interactive group. You warned me about this. Okay, the whole point of this session is to challenge you, to make you feel awkward, but also to give you some stuff that will allow you to create a sense about your identity as somebody who works in education. Now, so Steve can see, put your hand in the air if you're planning to be a teacher. You got that, Steve?
Yep.
Put your hand in the air if you're not planning to be in a classroom, but you're planning to be in some part of education somewhere. Okay, we've got a fairly good mix there. You got that?
Yep.
So, at the end of the day, regardless of whether you're just a parent, you know, just a parent, or whether you're supporting education or learning in some sort of environment, or whether you're responsible for it in the classroom, doesn't matter. All of the stuff that you're about to see are things that you have to build into the way that you yourselves define who you are in education. And it's not something you can get somebody else to do. And it's not something that you can rely on tradition to allow you to adopt and carry forward. And I'll give you a lot of reasons why, and Steve will jump into it as well. Steve, let me pull you off the screen for a minute. I need to get back to the PowerPoint just to get started here. All right, this is what it's about. But because I like to really put it on people and make them squirm in situations like this, That's only part of the title. The rest of the title is that. So the plan is simple. We're going to go through a who times two, a what, when, where, how, and a why sort of a question. And all of it's designed to do this. All of it's designed to make you challenge the ideas that you know about already and you're comfortable with, explore possibilities, reflect on them, and then do some sort of change that's related to it. Now keep in mind that what we're talking about is a dynamic activity about learning. You're experiencing some of it yourself, but at some point you're going to be responsible for doing that with others. So let's have a look. You've already been introduced to the two people involved. This morning early when you were looking in the mirror you realized who the third person was involved in this situation. And then we're going to have a whole series of random people, experts, including my mum. And we'll see how that goes. So, a little slow on the change. You're being remarkably quiet, Stephen.
I'm just taking it all in.
Okay, let's look at the what. What are we doing today? Well, we're going to be looking at the way education and learning happened and happens, and probably could happen in the future. And the way that we're going to do that is look at then, what happened then, and the is, well, we've got to think about where then starts and ends. Then we've got to look at now, and look at what possibilities there are for it now, and perhaps think about the difference, the gap. Steve is not familiar with mind the gap. I had to explain it to him before you came in. You all know what that means, right? In the context of getting on a train, you don't want to be lost forever in the void by missing the gap. But in the same sense, if you apply it to this context, you don't want to miss the gap in the profession that you're choosing to be part of. You've got to be really cognizant of that. You've got to be really aware of it, and you've got to know what it means in terms of your own personal behavior in what you're doing. So, Steve, what's your concept about the gap at the moment?
Well, the biggest thing about the gap that I think we're facing is our schools and your schools, most of the schools in the world, are organized like factories. And I don't know about you guys, but we haven't prepared kids to work in factories for at least 30 years, if not 50 years. And so we've got to rethink how we organize for learning. I always talk about the three things we need to talk about: what we learn, and how we organize to learn. And one of the big ones that's really hurting us in America is we can't get past organizing our schools like assembly lines.
Do you get the idea? He's talking about that difference between what schooling looked like in the industrial era. And the reference to an assembly line is, you know, you put stuff along and it shoots out the end, all the same sort of thing. Now, you've got to be involved in this. You've got to have some sense of what a school like that has been like. If you haven't experienced it yourself, you've seen it happen somewhere else, or your kids or somebody that you know has been in an assembly line school. Let me show you some photos that might help in this process. Well, okay, take a deep breath. This is going to take a little bit of patience. The when that we're talking about is then, today, and tomorrow, as I said. And the difference is between the industrial and the information ages, or the pre-industrial stuff. Now let's have a look at what we're talking about. Steve, we're looking at Socrates, actually. And we've come along...
Ian, let me make another point.
I knew he was going to say this.
Sorry to interrupt you.
All right, go.
In the industrial age, we didn't really care what the students' motives were, because our
Steve,
goal
stop for a
was
sec.
to turn out compliant workers.
Okay, do that again. We missed a little. There was a blip in there.
Okay, in the industrial age, we didn't really care what the students' motives were. We were only concerned that they turned out as compliant workers. That was our number one goal. Today, it's really important that we consider the motives of the learners, because we can customize and individualize like we've never been able to. And we need a different person in society today, worldwide. We need different people than we needed in the industrial age.
All right. Now, let's have a look at some images about what school looked like from the beginning all the way through to yesterday, today. I think we've come a long way since grown men dressed themselves in sheets and sat around in the open air on cold, hard rocks and talked about great ideas. Well, at least that's my thought of it. But there's something disturbingly similar about Socrates' learning environment and the learning environment that you see represented in some of these photographs. These are, obviously old ones. You get colour if they weren't that old. But let's move away from the old version of schooling and take a look at something more modern. There you go. There's a modern version of it. We've jumped hundreds of years in the process. Coming a little closer to where we are, there's something disturbingly similar in all of these things. I'm sure you've got it. This is where you're writing down one thing that you see in these photographs that's similar. And I'm going to collect these and mark them. I'll give you you'll fail if you don't get it right. Okay, that was a joke.
These guys have no sense of humor.
They have none at all. None whatsoever. They've got about 30 more minutes to develop one, though, I think. Have a look at this, and now have a look at the one that I took yesterday. Weird, isn't it? All they did was change clothes. Exactly the same. I haven't seen you write anything down yet. What's your name? Sorry? Ruth. Ruth's a good sport. I like to pick on people. You get to pick on me anytime in question time. So everybody write something down. I'm serious. I need you to write something down that's similar in all of those photographs. It could be a one-word thing. It could be something that's a phrase, but don't write a dissertation. We haven't got all that time. Steve, I want you to talk about your research on kids and the word result. Hang on a sec. You know the what word represents school thing?
I've been asking this question for about, it's going on 20 years now. If you ask high school kids to describe high school in one word, what would they choose?
Okay, now that is what you have to write down next. If you were going to, what would you reckon the one word that the majority of high school kids would call or describe school as? Just one word. Everybody write it down, cover it up so the bloke next door doesn't copy it. Ruth, have you written it yet? Come on, a word. One word that you reckon most high school kids would use to describe school today. And I bet you $1 that this bloke over in Kansas will be able to read exactly the word that you've written on your page. Oh, sorry. That you've texted on your thing to send to others, all right? Steve, tell them what they wrote.
Boring.
Put your hand up if you got boring in there. Isn't that disturbing? Good Lord, so to speak.
He and I've only had 4 answers to that question ever.
What were they?
Worthless, prison, and sucks.
Boring, worthless, prison, and sucks. Which one did you do, Ruth? Boring. There you go. It's this. You could get a. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this in this group, but if you take that story to the pub, free beer, I'll guarantee you. From everybody who writes boring. Oh. Okay, boring. So let's have a look at this cartoon. This is one of my favorite cartoons. Watch her. Okay. She says, if you ask me, they should be putting airbags in certain textbooks. Now, before you just think this is a cartoon, check that bloke out in the back. All right, now, back to the lines of the cartoon. If you ask me, they should put airbags in some of these textbooks. Well, they have. If you use it the right way. And it's not as easy as just opening the box and being social on your networks to do this. And that's where some of the real stuff comes in the sorts of things that you have to start to make up your mind about as people involved in learning today. So, Steve, talk to me about technologies that you reckon will change the world.
It's funny, I was looking at your list, I'm following along with you, and I remember in the 70s and 80s that we talked about TVs were going to fundamentally change schools. And so far, I haven't seen that. Have you?
Well, I was too busy watching it this morning to even consider that question while I was finishing this PowerPoint.
Yeah, Ian, I think there's two different questions there. Technologies that are going to change learning or technologies that are going to change schools. My personal opinion is there's no hope for schools. We can't change them. But I think I can give you evidence of how learning has changed every day, all the time. You know, we're doing things and seeing people learn today in ways we never dreamed of, in ways that have kind of just, they've been serendipitous, that they've just kind of emerged. My boss, your friend Mike Cook, he put a new motor in the door of his truck to raise and lower the window that he'd never done before by watching a YouTube video. He took no class, he bought no textbook, he had no expert, he heard no lectures, and in less than 2 hours, he accomplished it. But that's not how schools work. There's a different world between schools and learning.
Are you done? Is it all right?
Yes.
Okay, right. Put your hand in the air so Steve can see how many people have done something they never knew how to do after a YouTube video. Whoa! Do you reckon, do you reckon, this is my Liverpudlian accent coming out again, do you reckon that you get the same response in any normal classroom that you go to? That the majority of kids would say, yeah, I've done that. Put your hand up if you think yes. Okay, put it down. Put your hand up again after I ask the question, Ruth. Put your hand up if you think teachers consciously are aware of that and ask the kids to use YouTube as a source of reference. Put your hand up if you think that's true. That's what's disturbing. Have a look around. Put your hand up, those 4 people again. Look around. Seriously, you can't look out the back of your head. Look around at the people who got their hands up. Hardly any. How weird is that? This is, what century is this? Right, there's the question.
Hey, I have another question for you.
I bet you would. Come on,
How
man.
many of you have had a teacher in your recent history tell you something that you could have Googled?
Yeah, you seeing this?
Yeah.
Morgan put his hand up as well.
Why would we take any time telling a kid something that they can Google?
Say that again.
Why would we take any time telling kids stuff that they can Google?
Oh, I got an answer for that.
Because we always have?
Well, I've got 2 answers for it. Yours and mine. Mine is, there's a power thing there. It's lovely to be able to control things. Think about your own personalities. What are you in the business for? Is it because you can be the teacher, the traditional teacher, and run things and have that power control, power play sort of in the classroom? Okay, maybe not. Maybe it's the I love kids thing that drives you in here. But somewhere in there is that power dynamic in a classroom that impacts the way that we work. And that's something that you need to consider. But I'd forgotten what my answer was. Can you help me, Ruth? No? Okay. All right, well, I've got a question up there.
At your age, memory gets to be a problem.
And you're laughing at this? I want to see your work. You fail. All right, have a look at this. You have to answer this question. Technologies that will change the way schools do business and blah, blah, blah. Who said it, about what, and when? And it wasn't Steve 3 minutes ago about technology. Okay, I can't wait that long. Here you go. Well, here you go. Isn't that weird? Because we hear this over and over again, and nothing changes. Thomas Edison wasn't here yesterday. But that same phrase is something that we hear fairly frequently. So let's keep going. We've got to go to the where now. And Steve, I'm going to bail on you for a minute and drop into a movie that you may have seen already. Okay, here we go.
stand before you today to apologize. The system has failed you. I have failed you. I have failed to help you share your talent with the world when the world needs talent more than ever, yet it's being wasted every day by an educational system steeped in tradition and old ideas. Well, it's time for a new tradition. It's time to realize talent isn't just in schools like this one. It's everywhere. It's time to use technology to rewrite the rules of education. To learn how you learn so we can teach you better. It's time a university adapted to you rather than you adapting to it. It's time for a different kind of university. It's your time.
Now that was a shameless ad by this university. And if I was to change any one thing in it, it would be his reference just to university. I think he should have said any learning environment, schools or whatever. Now, some of this you're going to get here. How much of it do you take into your conception of yourselves as an educational worker? That's the big issue, and that's something that you can't put off to anybody else for an answer. So let me see if I can get back to where we were. Okay, so I want to share, we're asking the where question, and that one was a very obvious thing, but I want to introduce another level of where that I think is important. And Steve's aware of this project. It was the Rwanda project that occurred in Kansas and some other places around the States with some interactive engagement with teenage kids in two vastly different places around the world. And this is the sort of some of the images you see. These are the kids in Kansas, obviously. And here I want you to look at the intensity of the learning that's going on. They're talking about these two things, HIV, AIDS, and genocide, and they're talking about mountain gorillas and a whole bunch of stuff. But what we've got now is a bunch of kids interacting. The fact that they're half a world away and in vastly different environments, it doesn't really make much difference to how they're getting on. But think about the real learning. Google something on genocide in Rwanda and read about it. Okay? Now, talk to these kids about their personal experiences with genocide. Tell me the difference in the quality of the learning and the understanding that you get from those two sources of information. Think about what impact that has then if you combine these things together and incorporate that as part of the vision that you have for schools and your learning, but also how you go about organizing what you do. It becomes a little hard when you've got kids on the other side of the screen telling you that that used to be Uncle so-and-so. There's not a kid in that group of 20 or so kids that didn't have that sort of story to tell. That's real. That's authentic. That is so simple to do. You can see how easy it is here. I'm just using my laptop with Skype to talk to Steve. So, okay, let's move on. So let's go to who to. Talk about massive changes in life. I want to introduce you to my mum. Usually I get her online, but she's having a bit of strife at the moment. But here she is, gorgeous as she used to be. And here she is, as gorgeous as she is. Oh, wait till I tell her about that reaction. That's very good. This is a woman that grew up in an era, think about this in one lifespan. This is a woman who grew up in an era where this was the most amazing advance in communication that she's ever seen. You know what that is? It's Morse code. And you had a little device that you... It wasn't texting, by the way, that noise, if you were trying to equate it. But anyway, so this is where she began. Think about, oh, I instantly became a favorite son when I took this photograph of her, and she loves the fact that I show this photograph of her all over the world. Hates me to death for it. You're not using that again, are you? Well, anyway, there's a reason for that, obviously, because I like to tease her. But, you know, she spends Christmases with her family in California and in Canada, and she does it all being 87 years old, hard of hearing, and she has macular degeneration. But she lives on this thing, and she's learning to do something that she never thought possible. This is the kids in Canada sending her a birthday card 2 days after Christmas. Think about the learning that's contained, the change, the flexibility that's contained in one body over a period of time, and the sorts of value that is added to our life about that. So, Steve, do you have any stories about, I don't know, people changing dramatically as a result of their use of a whole series of other learning techniques?
Ian, the best example I have is my son lives in Dallas, Texas, and my grandson, who is 8, has to kind of help him with Skype and work through some of the problems.
Do you guys have any stories like this? Oh, hell, I don't want to hear them. But I just want you to start to think about some of these things. Now, the how question, Steve, we've got up on the board. And well, how is a really broad topic. And it's not something that any single person can come to grips with without taking into consideration a whole lot of other variables in a context. The variables of the kids, capabilities, goals of the educational activity that you're doing, and so on. But I like to play with e-learning a little. You know, when somebody says to you e-learning, you know what you immediately think. And it's not what the e-words are directly following the e-learning thing. But I want to challenge you to the point where you start to redefine e-learning, to incorporate some of these things. And if you look in a dictionary under E, there are stacks of words that you can apply to this whole concept of defining a learning environment in such a way that it's vital, that's energizing, exciting, and even believable. Come on, I want a reaction. That was clever. Steve, they're dead. There's not a single although Ruth did smile, I noticed that. In case some of you don't quite get it, I've misspelled this word just to point it out. Yeah. All right, Steve, let's move on.
Okay.
We've got the active, reflective, inquiry-based, the WWW. What does that stand for? You should know this. No. Oh, gosh. How obvious. It's where, when, and what. Wherever, whenever, and whatever you want to learn. Gee, where'd you pick that World Wide Web stuff up from, anyway? Anyway, I want to go back to one thing, though. This is an important thing. The authentic and the system-wide stuff. Don't for 1 minute delude yourself into thinking that it's all about what happens to you in the class, or what you create in the classroom or a learning environment. That's what the difficulty of change is. People try to change things with a view to one specific location. And what your responsibility is these days in terms of being a professional educator, regardless of what level that you're working on or how you're supporting the learning process, the responsibility is for you to start to think in system-wide terms. If you don't do that, any effort that you make in creating change in the environment that you're working on is really short-lived. You've got to build it into a system, and you've got to, therefore, convince others that what you're doing and the change that you're incorporating or that you're contributing to is worthwhile. If it's not reflected and supported in a variety of different levels, then a lot of your effort gets wasted and you get depressed. And we wouldn't want that. Right, Ruth? I'm going to have to rely on you because your mates are just driving me nuts. There's no communication at all. I might have to pick on somebody else. All right. Now, I want to show you a remarkable thing. And again, Steve, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to bail on you for a second. You may all know this. And if you've seen this before, I want you to raise your hand when you figure it out, because there's something about it that I want to point out. And you can't raise your hand until I... All right, here we go.
So, Glasgow's got a great theatre, a lively crowd, and a great atmosphere. So far, though, there's just one thing missing. Talent.
Nearly 48, currently unemployed, but still looking at...
Have you seen this before?
...sing for you on Britain's Got Talent today.
That's nervous.
Nobody put their hand up, sir.
Yeah, well, that's not surprising.
I've got fighting with
All right, there are a couple of things about this. I'll let her start to sing for a minute. I'm tired of talking.
Oh, shame. But it's not an advert.
And have you done this for many a year?
Since I was 12.
Since you're 12?
I've always wanted to perform in front of a large audience. My name is Susan Boyle.
What was your reaction when you first saw that bit?
Where are you from?
What was Simon's reaction with the look on his face? Think about it.
It's a big town.
And then the change that happens in this process.
It's a collection of villages. That's a thing here.
And how old are you, Susan?
I am 47. And that's just one side of me.
Okay, what's the dream?
I'm trying to be a professional singer.
And why hasn't it worked out so far, Susan?
I've not been given the chance before, but here's hoping it will change.
Okay.
And who would you like to be as successful as?
Elaine Page.
Elaine
something like
Page. What are you going to sing tonight?
that. I'm going to sing I Dreamed a Dream from the Miserables.
Big song. Yeah? Yes.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by.
You didn't expect that, did you? Did you? No.
Okay, I really hate to interrupt that because that is such a brilliant... I can't see that, even though it was 3 years ago, without sort of almost tearing up because of what is contained in that whole story. But here's my version of the story. I want you to pay attention to this number here. And Steve, I'm pointing to the number of views on the bottom of the YouTube thing just for you. This is one of a dozen different versions of this, and the one that I wanted to use had something like 50 or 60 million views on it. The day, I don't know whether Steve did this or another mate of mine from over there, somebody, it was a Saturday, and somebody emailed me and said, you've got to take a look at this. And I had a look at this video that day, and this number was at 1,173. And this was at 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, it happened that I was doing an on-campus session with a bunch of school leaders in a master's program on that day, and I was organizing a presentation. So I thought, well, maybe I'll use it. So I went back to it at lunchtime, 2 hours later, to see what was going on, and this number had jumped to 3 million. Stop, let me point this out. We're talking 2 hours, and it had gone from 1,000 to 3 million. By the time I started presenting at 5 o'clock that afternoon, it was over the top of 30 million. Is that powerful or what? When it comes to considering the impact of that level of communication with so many different people about one phenomenon. Well, it seems to me that if this is the sort of thing that can happen in a very short period of time, as people who are responsible for the education of future decision makers, we need to be able to capitalize on that. We need to be able to use that sort of power in a responsible, planned and ethical way in order to make the job that we do realistic for the day that we're doing it in. Without that understanding, without that awareness, we're just doing the same stuff that everybody's done year after year after year, but we're expecting different results. Think about that. Albert Einstein said that the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over and again and expecting different results each time. I'm going to challenge you with this. That's what we tend to do in schools. So, let's...
Ian?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I know the video that you're showing them, and it's very emotional, but the one I told you about earlier that Mike used to change the motor in the door of his truck
Yeah.
has been watched 88,000 times.
Yep. So how many windows do you reckon have worked since then? Did you hear that?
Well, you broke up just a little bit.
I said, how many windows do you reckon are now working as a result of that?
About 10.
All right. Well, let's move on to the why, and I want to get to the questions that you're asked, but let's have a quick look at why. And here are some of my answers. You should be writing down a why question, why answer rather, that relates to why should we even think about considering all of these things that we've thrown at you today about change in a position that's so clearly defined in some people's mind about what a teacher does. Every time kids get in the backyard and play, they know how to work it. somebody gets the stick and stands up and everybody else sits down in front of them. But what is it? What's the why answer for why I'm throwing this and why I'm expecting of you some conscious, reflected thought about all of this stuff? Well, because obviously it's tied into the identity that you present. And you should. There's a lot of you shoulds in this one. Let's have a look at a few other you shoulds. You should inform yourself about why we do things and the way we do them. And you can read as well as I can write. So, or read. You know what I mean. Now, I was being delicate when I used this. There's a common phrase that most of you would know. It starts with a different word than this. Same thing. Change happens. And it will happen whether you're ready for it or not. And you need to be prepared to be able to manage that change in a responsible and professional sort of a way. So let's have a look at a few other things. These are the challenges that we want you to consider. The first thing is about identity, and the next thing is something totally off the wall in a sense. That global awareness that I referred or inferred in some of the shots that you saw about the kids in Rwanda. They're the challenges that I want you to consider in terms of how this stuff and the concept behind it and the reality of what is possible today in learning practices. What that challenge is how you convert that stuff into everyday practice that's planned in classroom and school environments. So here are a couple of questions that you might want to consider in working through those answers for yourself. You may not have fallen asleep to the point where you don't recognize the change in color in the letters here. I did that purposely, believe it or not. I think it's too easy to nod, which a lot of you have been doing today. You know the nodding syndrome? He says a wise thing, you guys nod, everybody feels good, and they go out. I'm not going to let you out of the room until the you in this statement starts to be something that you take with you. You can nod all you like. Ruth does it all the time. You can nod all you like. But until you start to take the responsibility that some of this stuff is the stuff, the core of what your educational identity is, nothing's going to change. Okay, we've got a big set of questions. Well, let me run through a few things here in terms of some of the realities of change. Can you read this? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to include all of my cartoon collection today, so you're lucky, but I'm going to go through a few of them. Interesting, but in 1954, the Rand Corporation built what they considered to be what a home computer was going to look like in 2004. That was the best guess. So in 2004, the computer actually did fill a room in the house. Remember the title of this session? The subtitle was, "The Future Ain't What It Used to Be." Thank heaven. We'd have to have an extra room in the house if everybody in the house wanted to have a computer and it looked like that. So things do change. And in education, things change dramatically. Look at these. Well, that used to be a little less complicated, a little less techy. But the reality is that the kids are out there not saying, can Jeremy come out and play? Can he come out and shoot a video with us? And the concept of digital imaging has changed somewhat. Digital image. Okay, let's move on. What about this interactive TV thing? I think kids are getting into more trouble these days than that little bloke did. But here's one for you. This is the classic. If that is not the best, you may be able to use this actually sometime in this course. Just tell them I said so. But the idea of having that excuse go beyond where it was, and so I want to stop now.
Hey, Ian?
Yes, sir.
I want to tell a quick story.
Yep.
Last night, I was having dinner in a restaurant in a town of under 1,000 people.
Yep.
I ran into a teacher that I work with, and she showed me a video on my phone that her kids had made video clips from live webcasts that they do on Friday night and of girls volleyball and of football. They've made a highlight film that kids in a middle school did, and I watched it on my phone in a restaurant in a town of under 1,000 people. That's how education has changed. Learning has changed.
And what you forgot was about how they had to change to make it work, mate.
Absolutely. The teacher is 23 years old, because I'm not sure that most of our traditional teachers would have had any clue how to approach that.
Exactly right. So let me finish with getting you to focus on 8 bullet points here. And this is the principles for education for you that came out of some work that I did in Sydney in Australia about preparing teachers for the future. Now those 4 things, and I guess, Morgan, what I'd like to do is make this PowerPoint thing available to these guys if they want it.
It will be, yeah.
All right, brilliant. So you don't have to take notes on your interactive device, read pen and paper, but you can get this, so don't sweat it if you haven't got this. It's all about considering things newly. These are the 8 core principles that I think new people in education need to consider. You know, I don't want to go through the whole lot, although, you know, this is going to do that, but I'm running out of time, so I'll let you read that. But please do take the time to have a look at these principles, because I think if you can come up with a current, today answer for these things that you're comfortable with yourself as a teacher, you'll be made. You will be that brilliant person that everybody at my age says, I remember the teacher that made a difference in my life. So let's go to one last thing and say, that's the goal of what you're supposed to be doing. That might include learning multiplication tables and learning how to use your pen or keyboarding. But there's more to it, and if you're satisfied with that stuff that used to be okay and ignoring all the rest, you're not doing what you should do, and I think you should go figure out a job that includes putting bricks together. Not that that's a bad thing, or digging holes, because it's more complicated and more professional in orientation about ensuring that people have control over their environment. Now, questions are going to come, but I want you to read this. Here's a blunt, in-your-face challenge. I'm sorry. Can you all see that? It's tradition. Just because you've always done it that way doesn't mean it's not incredibly stupid. Well, and that's where your reflection and thought has to go. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you can change the bathwater over and over again. Keep that in mind. And just in case you feel like there's a real risk involved in what you're doing, I want you to have a look at this.
I'll be fine. I'll do it.
This is a 4th grade girl doing her first ski jump. I want you to listen to the tone of voice and the change that occurs once she takes the risk.
I can do this. I'm gonna jump. Whoa, my ski's slipping off.
Remember, never snowplow, okay?
No snow plows.
Keep it straight, you'll be fine.
Okay.
Same thing on the 20.
Straight. Do you go faster on the in run?
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Is it any steeper, do you think? Not much?
Same steepness, it's just longer.
Well, just longer. Just longer. Just a bigger 20, that's all.
Yep. Have
It's a
fun.
bigger 20. Go ahead. I got it. Okay. Here. The longer you wait, you'll be more scared. I go.
Listen.
Just the suspense at the top at the first time freaks you out. That's the only thing. It's so fun.
Steve, we just watched a 4th grade girl do her first ski jump. Now, people, That's what it feels like when you take a risk and you get the courage built into what you're doing and you've thought about it and you've thought about it and you've agonized, you've had advice. If you don't take that step, you miss out on an awful lot. So on that note, I'll throw to Morgan if I don't know whether we've got any more time. But
yeah. Well, I think we can spend 5 minutes if that's okay.
That's right.
On questions.
You up for questions, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, Steve, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I'm grouping quite a few questions together here, but a few people in the audience are being quite critical and saying that isn't technology like YouTube simply for extracurricular activity, or they're saying that there's a difference between children knowing things that they might do in lessons and the kind of quick grasp of a situation that they might get from using YouTube technology.
Let me try that, Ian.
Yeah.
I think that where we've got to get to is our schools were developed in an era where there was a premium on information. When Ian went to school in the 40s, they had to tell him stuff because there was no other way to get it. Good teachers today let the kids use other methods to get the information, but use it in unique ways to solve problems and to accomplish tasks. Phil Schlechte is one of my favorite guys, and he's got a quote. He said, "A teacher's job is not to teach. A teacher's job is to create meaningful, engaging work whereby the kids learn the things we want them to learn." And so the technology just becomes a means of getting the information. The teacher's role needs to change to creating work that the kids are engaged with meaningfully that leads to the learning and the behaviors that we want.
Okay, that fits into another question actually I've got here, which says, with the benefit of all this amazing technology, how do you get the balance right between spoon feeding and real learning?
Well, that's a really good one, because one of the, I said earlier that in the industrial age, what we really wanted was compliance. One of the things we really want today for our kids is for them to become self-directed. And, if you tell them everything that they need to know, what to do, how to do it, they don't become self-directed. Yet, if you look at really successful people today, and by successful, they're successful in their families, in their communities, they have a different set of characteristics. Well, it's the same characteristics they've always had, but we need to help them more in schools, become more self-directed, self-reliant, great problem solvers and collaborators. That's not how our schools were organized, to create that kind of learner.
And I think if you take the time to look at those 8 principles that I showed you in the last couple of slides, there are some challenging things there that will give you a further way of going forward in that. I think the point that Steve's making is that you don't want somebody just to regurgitate what you've told them. It's simply that. You can't expect that to happen the minute they leave school, which is what happens in business and industry. You need self-directed people. We need self-directed people who are teachers. If all you're going to do is stand there and teach the way that I tell you I think you should teach without knowing who it is that you're teaching, there's something wrong in that equation.
Hey, Ian?
Yeah, mate.
Our friend Roger Shank always talks about when somebody says that a student needs to know something, the question that you should ask them is, in order to do what? And today, the in order to do what they, if a student needs to learn to do math to build bridges, then you ought to have your kids build bridges.
There's an innovative concept. Morgan?
Okay, just trying to tie this all together, Stephen, Ian. A statement that came through fairly early on the text wall says, surely if we give teachers, school representatives, the tools to improve schools, the technology to improve schools in the way that you're talking about, then we can bring about change that's positive. But I guess you guys are saying something different to that. It's not about the equipment. It's not about the electronic stuff.
No.
The main thing is about attitudes, yeah?
Yes. Steve, you can take over when I'm done. It is absolutely...
Well, one of the principles of the industrial age was centralized control of power. And we still have that. In our case, we're so stupid in America, we actually have the federal government tells us what we can put on students' lunch plates. They tell us what they have to teach. My opinion is that we don't need to get teachers to do all this stuff. We need to get the hell out of their way and let them do it.
If you go out of this theater and look around you, there's not a single thing that you do today that is not impacted in some way by conscious, planned use of technology that's appropriate. Not everything includes technology, and we're not suggesting that everything should include technology. It's about developing an attitude and ownership of learning. You want people who own the process. You don't want people who sit there and sort of lift the top of their head up and have somebody else pour stuff in and shut it down. If you do, I think you're in the wrong business today. So it's about attitude. It's about ownership. And it's about the willingness to take on something and make it your own. That's for the teachers, the new teachers as you are becoming, the new education workers. But it's also about the kids in classrooms that are dealing with a vastly different world, even to the one that you grew up in. Stephen, watch what's happening.
Yes,
watch what happens next.
Okay, I'm using my authority to cut things...
Wait. Come on. What are you going to do here? Thanks, Steve.
Hey, it was my pleasure.
Yeah, no, Steve, Andy, and I
hate it when I have to beg for that. Steve, it's been great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon, eh?
Cheers, Steve.
Hey, thank you.
So long.
Bye.
It's great to get a first-hand lesson on how to use some of this gear much more effectively and impressively than we do most days. So thanks, Ian, as well.
I have one more thing to say, though, and it's a serious invitation to you. If any of this seems like it's way beyond you, think about me. I didn't go to school in the 40s. I went to school in the 50s, and it's no big deal. But I'm more than willing to show you in 5 minutes what it takes to make this sort of stuff happen in the school environment. You know when you walk across the road to the other building, that little pedestrian area? If you look up as you walk past, on the top of that floor, that glass enclosure is my office for the moment. If you happen to have 5 or 10 minutes and you want to have a bit of a talk or an explore on how to do this, come and bang on my door. I'd really be delighted to talk to you. Thank you for your attention. And a round of applause for Ruth, please. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.